recall that we actually discussed this issue. It had to do with, if you can believe it, mental health professionals who actually are like pedophiles. I don't know how those two words go in the same line, but for some reason they seem to think that they work. And we were telling you about this organization called Before You Act, and which is something that we talked about. We had on Bob Hamer, a former FBI agent, talking about this when he went into undercover to bust NAMBLA, the North American Man-Boy Love Association. And then, of course, I've talked to you about how the parallel between these pedophile organizations who are trying to legitimize pedophilia are actually using the playbook of the homosexual activists. And so, we talked to you about it. We had a lot of people listen, but you know what? There's nothing better than an eyewitness direct report. That's why the Gospel of Luke is so cool, because Luke was an eyewitness. He wrote it down, and he interviewed eyewitnesses. And that's what we're going to do on today's show. Today, I'm really happy to have my friend Matt Barber, who is the Vice President of Liberty Counsel Action. He's an attorney, very smart guy. He knows all about the gay agenda, and he had the opportunity to actually go to this Before You Act conference with Dr. Judith Reisman, who has, she's done stellar research on Kinsey and stuff. But we have Matt here to talk about what he saw and heard. And Matt, welcome to our show. I'm glad that you're here. And finally, I get to talk to you about this. It's been a few weeks since you went, but welcome to the show.
Well, glad to be on with you again, Stacy. It was, to say the least, a disconcerting event to attend. But Dr. Reisman and I felt like somebody needed to be there to document what was actually said. Few people knew this thing was going to happen. Before You Act is a group of, as you mentioned, self-identified MAPs, or minor attracted persons, as they like to call themselves. You have to love the sexual anarchists. They love to use this euphemistic language to try to soft pedal everything they're doing. But the group of pedophiles, basically, and like-minded or supportive, certainly, therapeutic types and PhDs and doctors and, academic types with all the letters after their names, a bunch of elitist academics that, have taken tolerance and diversity here, at least in this case, to the ultimate extreme, pushing essentially what the crux of the conference was about, was to how to politically kind of strategize and to mimic the homosexual activists in the late 1960s, early 1970s, to push to have pedophilia removed from the American Psychiatric Association's DSM, Diagnostic and Statisticals Manual of Mental Illnesses, in the APA's upcoming deliberations in 2013. So the whole crux was, hey, we pedophiles, our poor pedophiles are the victims. We are unfairly stigmatized and demonized by society. Those were the things that were said. And it's because what our sexual orientation, quote, being minor attracted persons, is classified as a mental disorder. So they're taking a play right out of the homosexual activist playbook. The homosexual activists were successful in 1973 in having homosexuality removed as a mental disorder, or homophilia, and now the pedophiles are following suit.
Yeah, it's it's an amazing thing, and I'm just going to give a little bit of my background just in case I have a new listener. Everybody, I have a master's in clinical psychology. I did marriage and family therapy, worked with kids and all that. Did all of my training, completed well over 3,000 hours of internship so I could get licensed to be a licensed marriage and family therapist here in the state of California. This is the state. We jump through more hoops in this state to get licensed as a therapist than any other state in the country. I chose not to get licensed because the APA is liberal, because the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists have went pro-gay, and because I knew as a Christian therapist devoted to the Word of God and devoted to the fact that people could change who are struggling with this, that I was going to be gagged and put under a microscope and basically persecuted as a therapist if I held these points of view. I was vilified during my internship, even with Christians I worked with and a Christian school I went to. So I chose not to get licensed. But I can tell you, having gone to conferences, both secular and gay activist counseling conferences, this is not a joke, and they are doing this. And when I tell you, and Matt tells you, that these people are out there and they are totally indoctrinating children and the field, hello, and the field, we're not lying to you. You know, Matt, what blows me away about this Before You Act site, and I'm going to tell everybody, you can go look at it. I mean, this is out in the open. It's the letter 4, the number U, it's B4, the number 4, uact.org, okay? When you read through this website very closely, which I did, I read the whole thing, and I was so mad as I read it, and Randall can tell you, I was so mad. You know what they're doing under the guise of saying, you know what, pedophiles have no safe place to go to get counseling because everybody vilifies them because they don't understand that they're minorly attracted sexually to kids. And so many of these pedophiles desire mental health care because they're depressed and they're anxious and they have nowhere to go. And so we're uniting in order to get, them the mental health care that they so desire. What a bunch of bull. You know what I'm saying? And, you look at this and go, wait just a second. There are people that treat this. No pedophile that I have ever known personally, and I've known some, has ever wanted to get help. So it's a bunch of baloney.
Yeah, well, let's be, cut right to the chase here. We're talking about people who define their identity. This is who they are. This is their sexual orientation by feelings, sexual lust for, or sexual assault of children, feelings or behaviors, just like all, quote, sexual orientations are defined by feelings, temptations, and behaviors. These individuals define themselves by virtue of the fact that they want to have sex with children. Okay, yeah, but here was the focus here. This was an exact quote. At the conference, one of the speakers said the DSM should, quote, focus on the needs of the pedophile and should have a, quote, minimal focus on social control rather than obsessing about the, quote, need to protect children. I had never seen such narcissism, and I'm going to put on my amateur therapist hat here, bordering on sociopathy in my life. It was we're the victims. People need to understand, and here was another quote, the majority of pedophiles are gentle and rational. Here's another one. The DSM ignores that pedophiles, quote, have feelings of love and romance for children in the same way adults love one another. So it was, as with so many of these people who define themselves based upon some aberrant sexual desire, appetite, or behavior, it's me. It's narcissism on display. I saw it in its purest form at this perversion conference.
You know what? I'll put on my amateur therapist hat as well, and I'll tell you that calling them a sociopath is not an understatement. In fact, let me recommend a book to everybody. I've recommended this book numerous times, but there's a wonderful book called The Sociopath Next Door. And if you've never read it, it needs to be in your library. It's a very easy book to read, but what it does is it tells you what the characteristics of a sociopath are. And I'm going to tell you, Matt, I'll tell you that basically a sociopath has no conscience. That's the bottom line. They really have no conscience, and it's all about them. And narcissism, homosexuals are some of the most narcissistic people out there, and pedophilia falls right into that. So you're 100% right as far as that goes. And it's sickening. It really is.
Well, anybody who can say this, here's another statement, quote, in Western culture, sex is taken too seriously. That was a quote. And anybody who can say this, quote, children are not inherently unable to consent to sex with an adult. Anybody who even their mind can even go there, they're covering something up, or they themselves are lusting for or raping children. And anybody who can say that from my perspective, how can we say they have a conscience? These are children we're talking about. The damage this does to children is immeasurable, of course. Yet even that being the case, you mentioned Alfred Kinsey earlier and Dr. Reisman, who was with me, being the foremost Reisman, or rather Kinseyan expert, having exposed him as the utter fraud that he is. She has single-handedly discredited this man. Well, the entire sexual anarchy movement, whether it's the homosexual activists, the abortion activists, the radical feminists pushing, comprehensive sex education, or the pedophile activists here, they're all under this umbrella of what I call the sexual anarchy movement. All of that is built on this faux foundation of fraudulent research and ridiculous, mind-boggling findings, and I put that in quote, of Alfred Kinsey. And it's just an entire house of cards. His sole goal was to undermine and destroy the Judeo-Christian sexual ethic. And we now, they say there's a pre-Kinsey era and a post-Kinsey era. We live, unfortunately, in the post-Kinsey era, and we've seen what happened. They, destigmatized homophilia, homosexual behavior. It has now become a civil right. I mean, the people who engage in these aberrant behaviors are actually granted special minority status, suspect minority status. Well, the slippery slope argument, why do they call it a slippery slope? Well, because you slide down it. And with this before you act is evidence that we are reaching the bottom of the hill on the slippery slope of sexual anarchy.
Yeah, it's chilling because many years ago, members of people who are normal in the Christian community, people who are activists, have been warning society, saying, look, this is next. We're going to go ahead and try to do this. And you know what, Matt, I have a question. I know you've been doing a lot of interviews on this. Have you gotten any kickback from any homosexual activists or people who actually support Before You Act calling you crazy because you're like being an alarmist about this?
Yeah, no, although the pedophile movement used to march arm in arm with the homosexual activists in gay pride parades and the pioneer, really the founding father of the gay rights movement, Harry Hay, was a known pedophile, and he was really the mentor to Kevin Jennings, President Obama's safe school czar and the founder of GLSEN, the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network. He supported NAMBLA, wore shirts that say "I stand with NAMBLA" in gay pride parades. Finally, the homosexual activists figured out that it was not politically expedient to lock arms with and align themselves with the pedophile movement. So they're kind of, I say they're ideological cousins is really what they are. But there was a lot of crossover there, and there still is today. There are many homosexual activists who are pushing for the removal of age of consent laws and who advocate pederasty or adult male young boy sex. One of them was at this event, a self-described gay activist by the name of Jacob Breslow. Listen to this. He said that children can properly be, quote, the object of our attraction. He went on to objectify children and suggested that pedophiles don't even need to gain consent from a child to have sex with, quote, it. So he totally dehumanizes the child here any more than we need the consent from a shoe to wear it. And Stacy, he went on to use this slang foul verbiage to favorably describe the act of climaxing, quote, on or with a child. This is just appalling stuff, and no one in attendance objected to this or even said anything really. There was even some laughter. Now, Dr. Fred Berlin, who was the keynote speaker, he's with Johns Hopkins University. I mean, they had some heavy hitters. I mean, some of the who's who in the sexology movement were at this event. Dr. Berlin knew that Judith Reisman and I were there, and he said, he kind of spoke up later and said, well, you're going to anger some people with that, Mr. Breslow, and I just want to put on the record here that I categorically am opposed to adult sex with prepubescent children. I said, well, what about the pubescent children? He would not give me a clear answer, but he ended up backing away from much of what he has said in the past. It ended up sounding, because Dr. Reisman and I were there, and he knew that we were going to report on this, he ended up sounding like he worked for the Heritage Foundation. But, yeah, it was just appalling.
Yeah, oh man. I mean, can you even imagine what they would have said if you weren't there? Well, there is the music. It sounds like it's time for our break, so Matt, hold on, and we're going to take a break. We'll be back right after the break.
If you have a book, DVD, ministry, or product that you need to promote to the Christian community, Active Christian Media will help you to spread the word. Active Christian Media reaches a growing Christian audience with pertinent multimedia content. At the top of our communications network is Active Christian Media Internet Radio. Audio announcements on our talk radio programs enable your message to be heard by a